The window stood open upon a night thick with the breath of the southern sea. The shutters had been pinned back to coax a draft through the stone throat of the tower, but the air only eddied and settled again, warm as bathwater, heavy with tar from the harbor and the scent of feverfew crushed in window boxes by some cautious steward long ago. Below, the black mass of the city extended, roofs stacked like scales, alleys running like capillaries, lanterns pricking the dark as if stars had fallen and wedged themselves in gutters. He could hear the city even here, the clatter of a late cart, the shout and answer from a watchman, a cat's brief shriek. In the far distance, as if a sea beast stirred and turned in sleep, the long hush of waves against quay pilings held everything in its slow hand. Eddard Stark stood with his palms on the sill and watched the night as if it would decide the matter for him. His knuckles had a scar across them from a boy's fight in winter, when skin split easier in the cold. He rubbed that line with his thumb and thought of the north. He thought of snow that hushed the world differently, and of the wind that raked a man clean as it passed through him. He thought of the sound the hearths made, and how the eldest pine near the great hall groaned in storms. He thought of his children running in a corridor bright with cold, of a girl with a wooden sword chasing a boy down a stair and the boy's delighted fear, and he had to force his mind away from it like pushing a stubborn door closed against a gale. On the table behind him, the candle had guttered and then steadied. The wax ran in careful streams. The letter lay beside it, the parchment still holding the memory of the knife that had cut it from its roll. His own hand, he thought, not so steady anymore. His name, written as he had learned to write it at 10 years old in a chamber that smelled of ink and chalk and wet wool. Eddard Stark. There was a weight to the letters as if each were a small blade laid upon the page. He had drafted 3 versions. The first had been pure as snowmelt and would have doomed him. The second had been a net that could snare the wrong fish. The third was the right letter, or near enough to write as the city allowed a thing to be. It named the law and the realm and made a bridge between them the length of 3 sentences. It did not confess. It did not boast. It walked in from a side door and sat down quietly, as if it had been meant to sit there all along. A knock sounded on the inner door that led to the small passage. He did not turn. He did not say enter. The knock came again. The rhythm softened as if the knuckles had been padded with silk. He knew that rhythm as a huntsman knows the tread of a heart on stones. When the door opened, it did so with a whisper, and the man who came in seemed part of the whisper, a shadow wearing smell of myrrh and paper and a suggestion of lilies. "My lord Hand," said Varys, inclining a head that always reminded Eddard of a veiled lantern. Soft light, no flame shone. The hour grows late. Some find it a companion. Others find it treacherous. Eddard hadn't moved from the window. "What do you find it, Lord Varys?" "I find it an honest thief," Varys murmured. "It takes the minutes plainly. We see them go." "You said you would know when she moves," Eddard said. He turned then. The room was small, appointed with the careful stale care that came of many hands and no love. A chest, a table, a chair, a bed. A hand's chambers, perhaps, but he had slept in soldiers' tents more to his liking. Varys had stopped just inside the door. The eunuch's hands lay together like curled fish. "She is moving," Varys said. "The queen is a woman who learned early the art of losing without appearing to have lost. She will gather her household, and she will rearrange certain balances." The captain of the city watch supped tonight in a house not his own, with men whose livery was red and gold. The master of coin promised a purse of heavy gratitude to whoever can be made to remember that loyalty is a door that opens 2 ways. A priest delivered a blessing with an odd clause in it. The kitchens have been instructed to lay in a stock of almond milk for morning. "A morning breakfast for crows," Eddard said. "We have crows and we have gulls, and we have birds that sing only when the sky is dark," Varys replied, as if Eddard had made a list for him and he had checked things off. "The king sleeps. I have visited. He sleeps as men sleep who have hunted poorly and drunk well." The physician was careful. "The poison, Varys offered a small shrug. "The boar's tusk may have been ungentle, but a wound's course can be made to run swifter down certain slopes." Eddard could taste iron in his mouth, though his lips had not bled. "How long?" An hour. 2. 3 if the gods are busy elsewhere. Behind Varys the corridor was a strip of darker dark. He heard the soft scrape of a guard shifting weight, the leather whisper. He considered the weight of the city below them and the weight of the sea beyond it and the greater weight of the north above all, pressing down through the stones of the realm like a buried mountain. He had chosen in fewer words than this before. He had chosen at a ford on a field with a shout riding the wind. He had chosen in halls with banners massed like forests above him. He had, if he had not learned it, then he had begun to learn it, that a man who won the first fight might lose the second by presuming it would be the same. "You have always counseled patience," Eddard said. Varys smiled, his sad smile. His smile of a man seeing a child undertake his first uncertain steps toward a cliff and thinking perhaps the child has wings. "I counsel survival. I counsel the realm, inasmuch as the realm speaks to me in the voices of the very poor. Some patience is a luxury for those who think tomorrow will be shaped by their comfort. Some patience is only cowardice braiding its hair. Your lordship knows the difference." "I have been patient beyond my skill," Eddard said. He drew a breath so deliberate it felt like an oath. "And I have been slow to use what is not mine to use. That ends tonight." He crossed to the table and pressed his signet into the wax on the third letter. The wax accepted the wolf and held it. He tied the fold twice with raw silk thread. Varys had once indicated in passing was the sort used by men who wished their letters to arrive smaller in the hand than when sent. It was an odd thing to find one's fingers adept at. He took up a knife and cut the thread to leave it even, though he suspected no man who would break it would admire the neatness. "To whom do we entrust it?" Varys asked gently. "A rider I brought with me," Eddard said. "One who keeps his mouth as a second purse, close-tied. He will have a boat ready and a purse to keep it swift. He will not stop until he places it in Lord Stannis's hand." Varys tilted his head. "You choose Lord Stannis. Many find him ungentle." "I am not choosing a friend," Eddard said. "I am choosing the law. The law has few friends." "Ah," Varys murmured again, softer still. "Shall I send your man to you?" "I will go to him," Eddard said. He lifted the letter and slid it into a leather cover worn at the edges, as if it had been carried across too many rains. He looked again at the candle's steadiness, and then he looked at Varys, who did not look at the candle and yet always saw the strength of a flame. "You will go to the captain." Varys let the smallest pause rest on the air, as light as dust. "The captain is for sale tonight," he said. "He will be paid," Eddard said, "but not by the master of coin." "Ah," Varys said, and the word was almost contentment. "You have found a purse that does not pass through fingers that make new fingers inside purses." "I have found coin that belongs to the city," Eddard said. "Paid by a city that wants to sleep without torchlight shining through its shutters. The men of the watch will be told they serve the peace and not the purse. And their commander will be told that a lord of the north remembers names." "That is a kind of purse," Varys said. "Heavy in the right hand." "You will remind him of the weight," Eddard said. "You know how to do it without showing it." "And you will trust me?" Varys asked. The question floated up like a petal. "I will use you," Eddard said. "Trust is given to those who do not love it too much. You have never asked me for trust. That is why you have earned the use." Varys bowed. It was a shallow thing, but he had never bowed deeply, even to kings, and somehow that made it as deep as any man's. "The queen will move on the girls." "I know," Eddard said. The words tightened somewhere behind his ribs, but he did not let them show in his hands. He set the letter down, took up a second, smaller sheet and wrote 3 lines upon it. The lines named neither a person nor a place. They were words that looked like memory. He folded that sheet and sealed it as well. "Sirio Farrell," he said, and Varys's eyes changed in a way that would not have been visible if Eddard had not become a man who watched eyes as if they were weather vanes. "I was told he teaches my daughter to move her feet without tripping over her heart." "He teaches her to see her heart," Varys said, "and then to put it somewhere safe when she needs her hands." "He will have this," Eddard said. He will take her to the river, and they will walk along it like fishermen before dawn. If they are challenged, he will speak to the guards as if he has forgotten their names and then remember them. He will not lead her onto a ship unless it is a ship that sails and not one that sits waiting. He will be given coin and a name, and he will wait for her father's word. If it never comes, she will have her own. It will be done, Varys said. As for the elder? Sansa stays, Eddard said, and his voice did not break, and he found that surprising. A betrothal is a chain that gleams in candlelight. I will not pretend it is broken yet, but she will have 6 women with her, and 2 men who do not look like men a queen would hire. They will be dull as bulls and mean as mules. If the queen reaches for my daughter, she will find splinters in her hand. He rose then, and the motion made the candle flame bow. He took up his sword belt from the chair back and fixed it, the practiced loop and tug like a prayer spoken without thinking of the words. The sword's weight brought his body into the alignment it had known for years. He did not think of the snow again. He thought very carefully of the streets he would walk, and of whose doors he would knock upon, and of which guards had children and which had debts. The tower released him reluctantly. The corridor breathed heat at him. He passed his own guard, 2 men from the north who had eaten salt beef without complaint and who had looked at these shining halls as if they were the inside of a shell, and perhaps there would be a pearl if one only knew where to put one's hand. They fell in behind him. Varys drifted beside him like a second shadow that had found its own thoughts and preferred them. Down a stair, along a passage, through a door that had been new when his father was learning the feel of a sword. The night changed as they went, not growing cooler but becoming less crowded, the scent of flowering trees fading, the faint perfume of perfumers' alleys thinning, the smell of stale rushes rising because the day's cover had been peeled back. Eddard had learned the map of the Red Keep's nighttime sounds. One heard non-sounds, rooms where whispers stopped as one passed, places where the watch was meant to be and was not, windows that had shutters closed against the sea and windows that had shutters open with nets strung across them to keep out thieves with patience and rope. They came at last to the door of a little chamber where a guardsman sat his eyes half closed and his hands folded over his belly, as if warming them at a fire. The man came awake at a scrape, and his hand went to a spear before he saw Eddard, and then it went to his chest, one fist rising and falling as if in automatic pledge. "My lord," he said, as if the 2 words could hold off all that was converging in the city's dark. "Rouse Tom," Eddard said. "Then go and fetch the man we spoke about. Bring him to the kitchen yard and have him wait by the door with a red stain on it. If anyone asks why you walk the halls so late, tell them a mouse stole the cook's ring." The man nodded, halfway to baffled and halfway to relieved to be carrying words like a bundle the right weight for his back. He disappeared, his boots whispering. Eddard went into the chamber. Tom was there. Tom of 7, called so because he had 7 small scars on his knuckles in a neat row from where an axe had bit at him, and he had caught it in his hand once, years ago. Tom had ridden south with him. Tom had eyes that saw through fog. "My lord." Tom stood, the cot's blanket creasing at his knees. "You ride," Eddard said. He handed him the leather-sheathed letter. "You ride to the river and from there to the sea. The boat will be waiting. You will not drink anything that is not water. You will not say anyone's name. If a man stops you and asks you for coin, you will give him a little. If he asks again, you will give him none. You will give this into Lord Stannis's hand, and you will say this, that the law is waking and needs a hard pillow." Tom turned the weight of the leather in his hand. He had a face like a cliff one only saw from a distance until fog lifted. "Aye," he said, "and if I am cut down on the way, open it before you fall," Eddard said, "and put it in your mouth." Tom threw back his shoulders once as if shrugging off a cloak. "I'll need 2 men," he said. 3 would be noticed. 2 will be thought of as a debt being collected. "Take them," Eddard said. "Go." When Tom had gone, the room felt almost larger, as if a wall had placed its palms flat against other walls and gently pressed them apart. Eddard breathed once and then twice. Varys watched him. The eunuch's eyes were not sly tonight. They were tired, and in a way that did not ask for sympathy. You will go to Renly, Varys said. I will go to Ser Barristan, Eddard said. Then to Renly. Ah, Varys said. One should speak first to the men to whom truth is not an insult. Ser Barristan's chamber was a place where breath held steady of its own accord. The knight kept his armor like a liturgy. He kept his bed like a penitent. He opened the door himself, as if to emphasize the fact that he needed no one to open doors for him. My Lord Hand, he said, you are abroad late. So are you, Eddard said, glancing to the table where a cloth had been folded back from a plate and a heel of bread lay with its crusts bitten away. Some small thing like a bird's last work. Old men sleep less, Ser Barristan said, not with complaint. He stepped aside. Eddard entered. The white cloak hung on a peg like a winter waterfall. I have just returned from the king's door. He rests. Will you hear something you will not like and do your duty? Eddard asked. He had not intended to say it so bluntly. Perhaps it was better, the words clean and their edges shone. I have been doing so for half a life, Ser Barristan said without any rise in pride. He folded his hands. Say it plainly. The queen's children are not the king's, Eddard said. The silence after seemed to have a skull in it. You have known men who love a woman who loves her own reflection. The realm is not a mirror. The realm is a house where children sleep. I will not see it burned because a woman wishes her reflection were taller. Ser Barristan stood very still. He did not look at the cloak. He did not look at the sword. He looked at Eddard, and the look contained a history of moments where he had stood in other rooms with other men who had said difficult things. When he finally did speak, it was as if he had to ease the sentence around an old wound. There were always whispers, he said. A man of the sword learns to ignore whispers. A man of the crown must not. I have not wanted to be a man of the crown. But if I serve a king, I serve the crown. King Robert has named me to act in his stead, Eddard said. He showed the second letter then, the one that always felt to him as if it were heavier than a sword. He names the law. He names the heir in the law's language, not yours or mine. He will die, Ser Barristan. Perhaps you will be at his side. When he dies, the law ascends with him. I will not hold the city by swords alone. I will hold it by words that do not belong to me. Ser Barristan lifted the parchment with both hands, as if one were not enough. He read. His lips did not move. When he had finished, he set it down. The law has enemies who look like men, he said. Shall I stand at the door to the queen's chamber? You will stand at the king's, Eddard said. You will say to any who enter that the king sleeps and must not be woken by beggars dressed in fine cloth. If the queen comes, you will let her pass. If she brings men with her, you will ask them where they think they are. You will say the king is sleeping, and that sleep has its own small honor. Ser Barristan's mouth almost smiled. I will say that, he said, and if they try to force themselves through me, they will break themselves on you, Eddard said. But do not die for a door. That is not your charge. If you must retreat, you will retreat into the king's chamber and bar it with the king's bed. The king's bed is heavy and will make a better bar than the law tonight. Ser Barristan bowed then, the kind of bow a man makes when his bone makes the bow and not his pride. You have grown sharper since you came south, he said. I have bled a little, Eddard said.
Renly's door wasselen.
Assess a door then an announcement. It had a guard with a cloak green enough to be seen at midnight. It had a handle burnished by hands that had otherwise never worked. Renly's chamber smelled of oranges and new leather. There were 3 candles where one would have done, because 3 made a room feel like a feast even when nothing was being eaten. Renly himself stood near a window that was open and did not have a shutter but a screen of carved wood that threw squared shadows. He was not in bed because he had never yet learned to yield to sleep as a man yields to a lover he actually loves. He wore a robe, but his chest beneath it looked like a young knight's chest at tourney, full of its own idea of its purpose. He smiled when he saw Eddard, and the smile was half invitation and half amusements at his own life. You've smelled the wind, Renly said. Is it coming from the east? It's coming from your brother, Eddard said. It will be here by morning. Renly's eyes changed. little petals of calculation closing. Then we must not be, he said. By morning, I mean, it's well past the hour when good counsels look like cowardice and cowards look like prophets. I told you before, take the children. Hold them. Men will follow the man who has them and speaks the right words. The law will catch up. The law is a mule. Force is a horse. I will take the children, Eddard said, but not to be hostages, to be kept safe until the law sits. I will not place a boy with hair the color of summer wheat upon a chair because his mother has sharpened her grief into a knife. Your brother Stannis will be king. Renly laughed softly, like a man at a play that he enjoys knowing the words of. My brother Stannis would skin the joy from a festival if it had a loophole in it, he said. He is iron. He is not loved. He is lawful, Eddard said. He will be king. And what will Renly be? Renly asked, only half in jest, because even in jest his hunger was honest. Shall Renly sit and watch the cook count eggs? Renly will choose whether he is a brother or a rival, Eddard said. He will choose tonight. If he is a brother, he will bring his men to the children's chambers and stand in the corridors with swords and smiles. He will hold the halls. He will say to anyone who asks that a king's nephew should be guarded until the king's word comes down the stair. He will say it as if there is nothing else to say. If he is a rival, he will go down to the stables and ride into a night that is about to be crowded, and he will find allies that take kisses as promises, and he will come back later when he thinks the city will be tired, and he will think he knows where the doors are. Renly moved past the screen and came into the square shadows, and the shadows lay on his face like a grid, as if someone had planned him and he had stepped aside from the plan. You speak sharper, Lord Stark, he said, and there was admiration in it and also irritation from an old bruise. I will be a brother tonight. In the morning I will see whether my brother wishes me to remain such. In the morning, Eddard said. Your brother will wish a brother stood beside him and not a mirror. Men who like their own faces do not need mirrors. They need maps. Renly studied him for a heartbeat longer, then clapped his hands, and the sound was the sort that would have set a hunting hound's ears pricking. Two men came from a side door, as if they had been waiting for such a clap all their lives. Orders were given. Eddard watched candles, men, the width of a sword's arc in a corridor. He had become a man who counted angles. In the hours that followed, the keep acted like a body whose nerves had all woken at once. Word went along hallways without feet carrying it. Lamps were born, then doused, then born again like stars remembering themselves. Men who had been asleep were suddenly washing their faces. Women who had expected to sleep late sent their girls for dark dresses. Keys emerged and disappeared. The kitchens lit bread ovens, then pretended they had always intended to do so. Eddard went to the barracks where the city watch kept half their men when they were not parading their halberds. He went without cloak and without herald. He walked through the front door and into the room where Janos Slynt was asking a man for a game of bones. The captain of the watch looked up with surprise that worked along his cheeks like astonishment that there was meat after all in the stew. He blinked at the sight of the hand in his doorway, and his hands stilled on their reach for the cup. "My lord," he said, with a tilt of the head that could become either deference or insolence depending on the weight set upon it. Eddard set the weight. "Walk with me," he said. They walked out into the yard where a lantern hung on a nail and did not much succeed in illuminating anything but itself. Night lay around them like a drum. Eddard did not speak until they were near the well. The well looked at the sky and showed it back like an answer. He set his palm on the well's lip and felt the stones chill with something like relief. "You have been offered a purse tonight," Eddard said. "It will be heavy. It will be immediate. It will be brought by a man whose hands know how to weigh such things. In exchange for this purse, you will be asked to bring your men into the throne room tomorrow and stand like good chairs while a boy sits in a chair too large for him. You will be asked to be furniture." Janos Slynt's eyes flickered. He had the kind of face that had learned to look confused while its owner counted. "The watch serves the city," he said. "The watch serves the peace of the city," Eddard said. "You and I will agree on that. The peace of the city does not need furniture. The peace of the city needs men who remember what a riot smells like. It needs men whose mothers live by the river and who understand what burning oil does to a roof. It needs a captain who does not want to sit in a noble's hall because there is always some small thing that sticks between his teeth after, and he does not know what it is. He took a breath. You want to be a man who can buy meat and have a second cloak for rain. That is not wicked. You want your son to be apprenticed to a man who is not a fool. That is not wicked. The purse you were offered will buy those things. And then one morning you will wake up and find that you are not Janos Slint, captain of the watch. You will be Janos Slint, the man who stands when a boy says stand and sits when a woman nods. Janos's throat moved. What are you offering, my lord? I am offering you the thing you think you cannot have, Eddard said. I am offering you to be Janos Slint, captain of the watch, when the city wakes. I am offering you the coin you were offered, but from a hand that will not require you to pretend you have become furniture. The city keeps its own treasure for fires and sieges. There is enough to pay your men their arrears and to purchase new oil for the lamps and to repair the northern gate hinges. There is enough to put a simple glass over the eyes of the men who die doing their duty so the flies will not bother them while you eat. I have the keys to that treasure tonight. In return, when you bring your men to the throne room tomorrow, they will not be furniture. They will be men. They will stand for the law. They will take their orders from the man the law names to give orders. Janos Slint breathed through his nose, a sound like a bellows. And if the woman who wears gold lions on her sleeves becomes queen, if she offers me an earldom in 2 years' time and a new house and a terrace with a fig tree, you will think of your son, Eddard said, and you will think of how old he will be in 2 years' time, and you will think of whether you want him to live in a house with a fig tree that men come to with whispers and knives at dusk. You will decide you do not. I am offering you something better than a fig tree. I am offering you to keep your own name without it embittering in your mouth. He let the words sit. He knew the shape of silence that came when a man lifted a weight from the ground and measured it. I will need to see the coin, Janos said. You will, Eddard said. You will count it yourself. Men move for many reasons. Pride and fear are easy names for currents that are knotty or close to the bottom. Coin is a language anyone can speak. The chest was brought, and Janos's fingers ran through it like a man testing grain for rot. He found none. He closed the chest and looked at Eddard in a way that was not adoration, and not respect, but was near enough to the latter that it might behave like it when other men were watching. My men will be in the throne room, Janos said. They will be men. Good, Eddard said. He did not smile. He found he had to relearn the art of not showing a thing. It had protected him when he did not think he needed protection. Now it would serve him when he did. When the raven that would carry word to Caitlin was being coaxed with corn because it had decided it was night and the sky did not need letters, Eddard went to the corridor outside his daughter's rooms. He stood with his back to the stone and felt it against his skull, and he let his eyes close and did not sleep. He thought of 2 children at Winterfell's yard, bent over a game with stones and chalk that they had made themselves and made rules for and argued about and then reinvented. He thought of the way Sansa had inclined her head, always the right degree, even when she was small. He thought of the way Arya never had. He thought of a boy in the north whose laughter had been a sound the snow ate and threw back in pieces. He thought of a boy who was not his own in a way the world counted but was his in the way that counted more. He thought of a king with a dirty laugh, and of the way that laugh had fallen quieter over the years until it had become mostly a memory of itself. He thought of honor as a cloth that had been washed so many times that it had gone thin but could still be folded and laid out, and of how a man knew when to use the cloth to bind a wound rather than to cover an altar. Syrio Farrell arrived like a thought one has before the thought announces itself. He moved down the corridor without his feet seeming to touch. He bowed a little, a flourish contained to 2 fingers and an eyebrow. I have a message, Eddard said. You have a father's eyes, Syrio replied, as if it were the same thing. The girl will be water for a time, and then she will be stone when she needs to be. This is not hard. The sea teaches it. There will be men, Eddard said. They will not intend murder. They will intend obedience. Do not give them either. Sirio smiled light, quick, almost sorrowful for those who did not know how the world danced. Of course, the hours pressed. He heard Sansa's breath through the door once, a soft, unmeasured music. He heard Arya stir, the quick rustle of a body that could not settle and then decided to pretend to. He heard the moving of men at the end of the corridor, and the sound of armor being unstacked, and the soft smell of oil used on hinges that had not been oiled in too long. Dawn comes even in a city that thinks it can hold it off by keeping lamps burning. The light called itself into existence in streaks, as if it had slipped between shutters and could not be stopped by cloth. The night did not end so much as set its things down. He went to the king's chamber one last time before the hall. Ser Barristan stood like an old oak. He had blood on his sleeve, but it was not in a way that meant a fight. It was in a way that meant human bodies were human bodies. He inclined his head. "The king sleeps," he said, and something in his voice acknowledged that the tense was an effort. "The hall," Eddard said. The throne room had already taken the form of the storymen would tell later when. They wanted to say they had been there. The long red carpet was a dark river that no one had yet decided whether to cross. The light came in slanted into dust. The throne looked like an accident that had kept deciding to be itself again. The court had gathered in layers, the bold near the center, the wary behind pillars, the foolish scattered where they would be seen. The queen stood with her hair dressed like a proclamation and her expression as calm as a winter pond that's thick enough to walk on if one does not think of how cold the water beneath. Her children were near her, the blonde of them bright as wheat in a field that no one has yet reaped because the reapers are drunk. The dwarf was elsewhere, invisible, and Eddard wished him well for it. Janos Slynt's men were where they needed to be. Eddard saw them with a soldier's eye, this one angling his halberd in a way that meant the shaft would not catch a man's shin by accident. That one standing where the view along the wall would break any man trying to be clever into pieces he would have to show too early. Renly stood near a pillar, a foot back, his mouth quirked, and his men's hands sat on their sword hilts lightly, the ease true knights cultivate, a casualness that is a cousin to speed. The herald took a breath. He prepared to say a boy's name because a boy's mother had pinched his ear with money. Eddard stepped forward. "The king yet lives," he said, and his voice carried through the hall not like a shout but like iron on stone. "While he lives, no one sits beneath that roof with a crown on their head. When he dies, the law will speak with the voice he has given it. The law has a name, and it is not any of yours. It is not mine." He lifted the parchment. The wax seal caught the light. A murmur rose like a flock of birds startle flying. The queen's voice reached him like a thread. "Lord Stark," she said, "you forget yourself." "I forget nothing," he said, and that was true in a way he wished were less painful. "Your grace, your children will be kept safe. The peace of the city asks it of me. The king's will orders it. Captain Slynt." Janos moved like a man stepping into his new boots and finding them the right size because his feet had been measured by a man with a string and patience. "My lord," he said, with the tone of a man whose ears are turned to the man he addresses, not the woman whose garments flash. "You will take a file of your men and escort the royal children to their chambers," Eddard said. "No one will enter without the king's warrant signed by my hand. You will be gentle. You will be firm." The queen laughed then, and the sound was silvery and had been polished for such rooms. "You have no warrant here," she said. "You have a piece of paper. I have a child." She put her hand on the boy's shoulder, and the boy swallowed, and Eddard felt a pang for him that was deeper and cleaner than he expected. "The realm needs strength, not letters." "The realm needs both," Eddard said. He looked at Ser Barristan, and the old knight stepped forward and placed his palm upon the empty arm of the throne as if blessing an altar. "Ser Barristan, you were witness to the king's will." "I was," Ser Barristan said. His voice had that sound to it that one hears from old trees when wind moves through them. The hall stilled because whatever else men are, they are men who recognize when a thing old enough to outlast them speaks. The queen's gaze did not flicker. It shone. "These are words," she said. "Words to steal from children. Will you be thief, Lord Stark? I will keep the house from burning." Eddard said. He lifted his hand and the captain of the watch moved, and his men moved, and the sound of boots on stone was the first true thing the hall had heard that morning. Prosaic, ordered, deliberate. The queen's household guard shifted, the red and gold of them bright as pomegranates cut open. Swords were not yet drawn. Renly did not move. Renly's men's hands did not tighten. The queen's boy king straightened his back, because he had been told to buy tutors who had never been under a roof when it began to collapse. His younger brother peered at the men with the unstudied curiosity of a child who still believed that men with weapons would always only be playing at something. "Step aside," Janos said to the household guard. His voice did not ask anything. It was the voice of a man telling a door to do what it is a door's business to do. They did not. For a heartbeat too long, they did not. In that heartbeat, Eddard saw 100 lines across which swords would move and then stop and then move again. And the hall would be a place where men stumbled and tried not to fall on what had been knocked to the floor. He looked at Renly. Renly's chin lifted a fraction. An acknowledgement. A coin placed in a hand without show. Eddard lifted his fingers. Renly's men stepped forward, just enough to remind the hall that there were other swords. Ser Barristan's hand did not leave the throne. The queen's eyes moved to Janos and then to Eddard and then back to Janos. She tilted her head, the motion almost affectionate. "Captain," she said, and put a silver shine upon it a lesser woman would have needed paint for. "Think what you do." "I am," Janos said. "I am thinking of my city." He gestured. The file of men passed the guard, not with blades out but with their helms set straight and their halberds angled so that the points did not nick anyone. They formed a soft wall around the children. The queen's hand tightened on her son's shoulder once only. Sansa made a small sound, quickly muffled by a woman behind her patting her sleeve as if to blot it. "Your Grace," Eddard said, and he gave her that because the giving of it cost him less than it would cost her to refuse to take it. "You will come with me to the council chamber. You will bring 3 of your ladies with you, and 1 old man who can play Sivas so that there will be a witness, not you. Ours and not mine. You will not bring guards." "And if I do?" the queen asked, amused again, but there were fine lines at the corners of her eyes that had not been there when the hall began to fill. "Then you will have fewer men than you have this morning," Eddard said, "and you will be a queen who must keep count by subtraction." "Come." The hall did not erupt. It did not explode into the story men would later prefer to tell one another. It shifted, like a great beast settling itself. The queen moved like a woman who had decided to stand on a certain stone while a river changed course. She walked and her train followed, and the air followed the train. Eddard walked beside her but a half-pace behind, because precedence cost him nothing and words could be coins that bought other things. In the interim chambers, Renly caught up with him with a nod that said more than any sentence. "We will be in the small hall by the eastern stairs," he murmured. "If the queen chooses the wrong door, we will be in the right place. She will choose the door that takes her to the place with the largest mirror," Eddard said. "Then we are safe," Renly said, almost smiling again, because even in gravity he knew how to let a light in. The council chamber felt as if it had been swept too many times. The chairs had been moved in and out for meetings that had not mattered, and they had learned to resent sudden importance. Eddard took his place at the head of the table because there was nowhere else to stand that would not be petty. The queen sat without waiting to be asked. 3 ladies arranged themselves behind her as if they were letters written on her back. The old man took a place by the window and nodded as if he had always intended to be present for this and had arranged his morning accordingly. "Consider," the queen said quietly, almost companionable in her widowhood before the fact. "You will ruin your daughter. Who will marry a girl whose father made war on a boy upon a chair?" "I will not make war on a boy upon a chair," Eddard said. "I will make peace around him and keep him from being used as a sword. And then he will not sit there, because the law is not a chair." She leaned back, her fingers tapping once, subtle as a cat's yawn. "You came south wearing snow on your shoulders," she said. "You mean to carry fire back with you. Do you think this will make you stronger? The realm likes men who bend, Lord Stark. Fears men who stand. It breaks them. The realm does not like men, Eddard said. It tolerates men. It endures men. Prefers mothers. Prefers fields. Prefers full granaries and herds that do not sicken. I have been many things not to the realm's taste. It has endured me. It will endure this. Shall I tell you what will happen? She asked, and her voice warmed with its own prophecy. You will send your letter. Your sullen monk of a Lord Stannis will call his standards. Houses that have never seen the sea will pretend to be sailors. The city will be hungry because ships do not love blockades. Men will talk about the nature of a king as if kings were a species of bird. Meanwhile, a lord with a garden will offer me his vines and the patience to let grapes ripen. Do you know whose banner he flies? Do you know how far his table reaches? Do you know what youth will do if offered a crown in springtime? I do, Eddard said. He will choose whether he is a brother or a rival. He folded his hands upon the table. I have asked you here because I respect you enough not to have you dragged to a cell. That respect will last as long as you respect the law. If you send men to fetch my daughter, those men will lie on their backs and count the ceiling's cracks. If you send letters to men who love you more than the realm, those letters will be read before they are sealed. If you instruct the kitchens to add something bitter to my cup, I will drink only from the well behind the barracks for the rest of my life. You threaten me with wells, she said, and her amusement was real this time. I do not threaten you, Eddard said, and found it was true and felt it settle in him like a stone in a cairn. I describe to you how the day will proceed. You are not my enemy. You are a mother. I refuse to be your enemy because there are too many men who enjoy that part far too much. We will be cold to each other. We will be polite. In time, we will become weary of that, and then perhaps we will be honest. I suspect we might find we have both been bored by many of the same men. For the first time, her eyes altered not with calculation but with something like curiosity peering around a pillar. You are not the man I expected, she said. You are less interesting and more dangerous. I intend to be uninteresting for a very long time, Eddard said. There are mornings when a city changes its mind about itself. It happens not with a bell but with small notes played in kitchens and barracks, with footfalls down certain stairs, with the decision of a woman selling fish to keep a handful for her own pan. In that morning, the red keep's breath slowed. The queen's ladies brought in a tray with a pitcher of watered wine. Eddard did not drink. Renly appeared in the doorway, and his glance said that the corridors were held, for now, as if a careful hand had smoothed their hair. By midday, the king was dead. Men who had been boys with him once long ago wept, some for him, some for themselves because they were now older than they had been moments before. The bells were rung as if the men pulling them meant to pull the bell tower into the sky. The city listened the way it always listens to bells. It set its pace to the new sound and then began, inevitably, to set its own pace again. Eddard stood in the silence after the last bell. He had been to the bedside. He had looked upon the face he had known in youth and on campaign and at long tables. It had looked at the end like any man's, because death is the only tut. Or who does not play favorites? He did not feel triumph. He did not permit himself mourning beyond what he would give in the privacy of a room he had not yet chosen. When he walked back into the throne room, the parchment in his hand did not shake. The room had been cleaned of some of its spectators. Others had come because they could not bear to be absent when power cleared its throat. The queen stood and her chin lifted and the boy's jaw trembled and then steadied because he saw his mother's chin and chose it. Renly stood where he had stood before, unchanged except that his smile had narrowed, the way a blade narrows when it is honed. Eddard read the will. He read it in the king's words where they were the king's and in his own where he had adjusted the king's antic love of comfort to fit the size of a law. He named Lord Stannis, and the name made a small, clean sound in the hall. He named himself as regent until the king should come to take his throne. He did not look at the queen when he said the part about the children being kept in care for their protection. He looked instead at the men with red hands from pulling bells. He looked at one woman whose face he had seen in the crowd the day he came south. He looked at the captain of the watch, who kept his gaze forward and had remembered to keep his chin from ducking. There was argument. Of course there was. There were men who made the noise of argument because it was the noise their bodies had been making since youth when their fathers had scolded them or praised them, and the edge of their voices was all they had learned to sharpen. There were men who actually had reasons. There were men who wanted to see who else would move and then move in that direction. Eddard let it happen. He let men spend words. He let them grow peacock-tired. He answered enough to make it clear that he knew which arguments were flesh and which were feathers. He said the law more times than he would have thought he could endure hearing himself. He found that his endurance grew as he used it. He did not think of winter. He thought of harvests. He thought of the hypocrisy of his own hands and forgave them in advance for the work they yet had to do. In the afternoon, after the boy had been escorted to his chamber and had been told stories that were meant to be soothing but were actually provocative, after the queen had walked back to her rooms with a movement like calm water and had broken a silver cup against a wall where no one could see, after Renly had done that particular thing he did among his men that made them feel as if he had remembered each of them when he woke in the morning and had thought very fondly of them as he broke his fast, after the captain of the watch had sent a man to his mother with a bag of coins she did not need because, in truth, she would have preferred the habit of her son's visits to the habit of counting money. After all this, Eddard stood again at the window of his chamber. The sea had changed its sound. Beneath the tar and the feverfew and the faint sweet from some courtyard's quince, there was now also the austere smell the air takes on when bells have been rung too long. He had in him a quiet that was not satisfaction. It was resolve's worn cousin, the one who comes over in the evenings and sits without needing a lamp. He put his hands on the sill again, and the stone did not seem so hot. He thought of a man at Dragonstone, reading a letter with a mouth that would never smile at him but might not sneer. He thought of ravens moving across the sky like burnt leaves blown by a precise wind. He thought of the riverlands and of a wife whose hair had silver not because age had set its hand upon her but because worry had, and then age had come and been jealous and set its hand there too. He thought of boys at Winterfell, learning where to place their feet on ice. He thought of the wall because he always did when he looked north in his mind. He thought of a boy on the wall who was not his son, and again in a way he could not bear not to be. The city spread below him, and for the first time since he had arrived, he saw it not as something to be endured and then escaped, but as a thing he had taken into his care. He did not love it. Perhaps he never would. But love was not necessary. Duty done without love was not a crime. Duty done in spite of love, perhaps that was something like grace. A knock came. Not Varys this time. The rhythm was heavier, more blunt in its honesty, like a man who could not dance but who would carry any burden across a field without complaint. He turned. It was Ser Barristan. The old knight stood in the doorway without his helm. His hair was very white. His face was not. "My lord," he said, "we have done the first things." "We have," Eddard said. He turned back to the window then, because if he looked too long at the man, he might say something indulgent and both of them would suffer it later. "Tomorrow we will do the second things. And after," Ser Barristan said, "the third. And then we will begin again," Eddard said. His hands on the stone felt steady. The night coming felt like a thing he could meet and speak to by its proper name. "We have a house to keep from burning. Some men like to see the flames," Ser Barristan said, with no bitterness at all, only the sadness that comes of watching certain things recur. "Then we will build walls they cannot climb," Eddard said, "and we will make gates that open for those who need to enter, and we will teach men to watch the walls and not the flames." He did not pretend to himself that it would be easy. He did not pretend to himself that in the building of those walls, his hands would not become the very hands he had distrusted in other men. He did not pretend to himself that no one would die in the keeping of this relative pitiful peace. He only stood and let the air move around him and thought of snow, not as an escape but as a promise that after eat, there is cool, and after cool, if one is fortunate, there is rest, and if one is less fortunate but stubborn, there is work that can be completed before the first frost. He closed the shutters at last. not to refuse the knight but to meet it on terms of his choosing. He turned and sat, and the chair learned him. Somewhere in the keep, a girl practiced stepping so lightly she barely felt the floor. Somewhere in the keep, another girl sat very straight and believed this all a misunderstanding that the world would correct in time if she were only perfectly good. Somewhere in the keep, a queen lay awake and decided which of her friends were now liabilities. Somewhere in the city, a captain of the watch looked at the coin he had not expected to have and thought about what it smelled like and thought of his son's hands. At Dragonstone, a man looked toward the east and breathed like a bellows once, twice, and then stilled his breath as if to learn what silence the letter still carried after its reading. In the south, the wind rose and carried the sea to shore in longer sighs. In the north, unheard by anyone in that hot city, a wolf called and no answer came, and then another call came, and then another, and then very far off an answer, as if the world had not yet forgotten the proprieties. He slept when sleep would take him and not before. He did not dream of snow. He dreamed of a table with long benches and of men and women taking their places at it, and of setting cups before them, one by one, filled not too full so that none would spill as they lifted them. He dreamed of tilt-yard dust that did not taste of blood. He dreamed of a child's hand in his, and of the way hands grow and become other hands and then let go, not because they are angry but because that is what hands do if one lives long enough to see it. Morning came. It always comes. The light took off its softness and put on its work clothes. He rose, and the body that had known fields and battlefields and halls rose with him, making its small noises. He washed. He broke his fast without appetite and with attention. He looked at the list of names Varys had left him in a hand like a spider's web, making concrete sense. He looked at the note Renly had slipped him with 4 words on it that meant an entire evening's worth of talk if one had wanted it to. He looked at the small scrap in another hand, the left-handed drag of it plain, with 2 words, "Take care." He did not know whether a 10-year-old or a girl with a wooden sword had written it. He hoped for the latter and suspected the former. He folded it and put it in his sleeve. He did not polish his honor that morning. He buckled on his sword and went to work. He spoke to men and listened to men and nodded at men and measured men. He sent out riders. He called in stewards. He opened a chest and then another. He read 3 letters and burned 2. He stood beneath a map and drew his finger along a river that had flooded 3 summers ago and would flood again. He met with a guildmaster who did not like him and told him so, and who was sent away liking him no better but believing he would be paid for honest work. He made a place for a man from the Stormlands whose house had been too small to ever be heard in this hall. He stole a cushion from a chair that had never been sat in by anyone who needed one and put it under the man's leg because the man's knee had been broken by someone careless, and it made him look like a petitioner when he was not. And as he did these prosaic things, he did the most radical thing he could do. He refused to die. He refused to let his honor be a scythe in someone else's field. He refused to let a smart man's whisper cut his children. He refused to make a story of himself. He made himself instead into something more stubborn and less beautiful. He made himself into the sum of his choices, taken not with a flourish but with a carpenter's steady hand. The city watched him. It did not fall in love. It did something harder and more durable. It began tentatively to trust. Not all of it. Not the parts that had profited best when law lay like a dog on its back. Not the parts that were so accustomed to flattery that fairness tasted like insult. But enough of it. The fishwives noticed when guards bought their salt and said please. The bakers noticed when a tax collector counted honestly, even if he counted. The tavern man at the corner by the Blackwater noticed when the young men with blades laughed less cruelly in his courtyard. In the high chambers, Varys continued to move without seeming to move. He brought Eddard tidings with a delicacy that made them easy to pick up without pricking a finger. In other rooms, Littlefinger smiled as if he had invented patience and began to invent something else. In another part of the palace, a queen began writing letters to men who valued her in ways that had nothing to do with crowns and everything to do with victory. Far away and everywhere, in a way one could feel if one held still in one's skin. Riders took to roads with banners furled and messages crossed, and men made their calculations in margins that did not belong to them. Eddard stood at mid-morning in a courtyard where the shade made a shape like a boat, and he watched his daughters come into it from the far side. Sansa moved as if she were a word at the end of a line and must be turned carefully so it would not be broken across the page. Arya came like a shadow's own impatience. He put his hands behind his back because if he put them otherwise he would reach for one or both, and that would tell the courtyard too much. He spoke to them with the words he had carried down a hall since dawn. There was fear, there was protest. There was the particular stubbornness of the young, which is so much like a new blade that has not cut its wielder yet. There were tears that did not fall and therefore weighed more. There was the telling of truths one does not wish to tell. You cannot do as you please. There was the offering of a consolation one hopes will be a true thing and not a lie. You will be safe. There was the refusal to go north because the law held them here for now, the law and his own design for the next steps. There was the promise of lessons, dancing, courtesy, the peculiar arts of southern women, and there was the binding of these lessons to the larger lesson: survive. When they had gone, he stood alone again, and he felt sorrow, and he did not indulge it. He folded it and put it with the other folded things. Toward evening, a courier returned, dust-caked like a loaf coming out of a too-hot oven. He had news from the Riverlands that was water and fire both. Eddard took it and read it and let his jaw set in that way men from the north have when they do not want to show strangers their teeth. He thought of Catelyn in a hall with men whose voices were shaped like their terrain. He thought of the storm that was rising on one horizon even as he held the levee on another. He called for a scribe and he sat and he wrote. And in his writing there was now the firmness of a man who had learned to measure and then cut and then fit. He did not know, cannot know, who would betray him yet, where and when and for what bright coin or old grievance or fresh fear. He did not know yet where he would have to be cunning and where he would be allowed to be simple. He did not know whether the boy on the wall would be allowed to be a boy long enough to become a man he could meet without wanting to apologize to. He did not know whether the queen would choose her children over her pride when the day came to choose, truly choose. He did not know whether Renly would remain a brother. He did not know whether Stannis's iron would be rust or blade. He knew only this, that that night he had played the game he had not wanted to play, and he had not lost. He did not count it a victory. He would not insult the men it had cost to stand where he stood. He counted it instead like a man counting the rings upon a tree after felling it. This much was one season, this much another, and there had been rot here, and there had been an early frost there, and yet the tree had stood as long as it had. He would build with what he had felled. He would shape the timbers. He would set the frame. He would do it with his own hands where he could. Night took back the heat a little. The smell of the harbor changed. Somewhere, a ship's bell sounded, soft and companionable, as if it were saying only, "I am here, I am here." Eddard Stark went to his table. He set his hand to the candle's base and steadied it, though it did not need steadying. He bent his head and began again.